maskaxdii dunidu malaasan mawjadaheeda kala miirtay ee macnaysay maarkii qarsoona
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. We have been discussing grade 11 unit a unit for grade 12, and we have talked about these activities before we were here. Now we are going to begin the next segment, which is reading comprehension. So the reading comprehension section, because as we have always talked about in the English language syllabus, for this secondary syllabus, the books are divided. They are, the layout, they have sequence of alphabetical sequence where A, B, C, D, E, sometimes G, H, but basically A stands which caters for listening and speaking. Then we have B, which is reading comprehension. Then C, which is for vocabulary, and then D, grammar, and E could be any other aspect of the English language. It could be oral literature, it could be language practice, fun sport, those so many other aspects of language which may come in. Then final segment we have E, which we always call write on, where the student is now required to produce a written response based on what he or she has already studied. Now, to begin with, this lesson, reading comprehension, we can see the objective is very simple and precise. Answer comprehension questions. After the reading lesson, after the student reads a passage, the student is going to be presented with a passage. After the students read the passage, they should be able to answer comprehension questions. So you as a teacher, the criteria you will use student to read the comprehension, we have discussed before so many methodologies: loud reading, silent reading, depending on the content or the text, the length of the text which they are going to read. You can tell the student, ask them to read individually, read it silently through skimming or scanning, or we might use loud reading, where you as a teacher or one student reads the passage loudly and clearly, and so other students listen attentively. Then after the first reading, then the second reading, every student should individually read the text, read the passage alone, silently. It's most preferred silently. Why do I say silently? Because silent reading is going to help the student to understand, to comprehend what the comprehension is about. So here are the methodologies which ask learners to discuss how the way of life in the past is different from modern day societies. As you remember, the unit topic was societies in the past. That was the name of the topic, societies in the past. So before even reading you can start brainstorming. Ask learners questions. Ask them questions to elicit or arouse their interest in reading what you are going to assign them to read. Such questions are going to be of very good help to you as a teacher. Ask them. Ask learners to discuss how the way of life in the past is different from the modern day societies. Tell learners to answer the questions after reading the passage. Then tell them to answer the questions after the passage. This, after, when they have read the passage, when you have asked them these questions, you brainstormed, they have developed interest, they will give you many answers. What is the difference between the societies in the past and modern society? In terms of social way of life, the way we live today, the way the mode of transport we use, for example, and the mode of transport we used in the past. How do people use to travel from one place to another? And how do they do it today? How is information passed from one person to another at the modern day, and how was it before? Let them discuss, let the students discuss this, the way of life of people in the past and in modern day based on these dimensions. Therefore, when they have got enough clue of what they are going to read, allow them now to read the passage. Allow them to read the passage. Let them read the comprehension passage and then ask them to answer the comprehension questions. This you can do orally. Ask them oral questions after they have read oral questions. What is the difference between the life of the people in the past and the people today? The questions are there in the books, in the textbook, so you can ask them orally. Maybe if the questions are 10 or 11, or you can choose to ask them 2 or 3 questions orally, and the rest they do it as class activity. That's why in the evaluation, in the assessment segment here, we have said either use oral questions or written exercise. Now the written exercise could be those questions. Let them do it at class. Every student does answer the questions in their exercise books. Now, after reading comprehension, we have always seen that there is the segment C, vocabulary. And since we know very well that vocabulary is one primary concept of learning English language, because if you read, the more the student reads, the more they come across different vocabularies. They come across new words. So these new words, how do they learn and acquire more vocabulary in order to improve their written, spoken, and listening ability? Therefore, this segment is very important. So as teachers, you should not ignore the vocabulary, just the way each and every other aspect is important, from the reading comprehension, the listening and speaking, the writing, the other literature segment, everything. So you should connect all these. So vocabulary, there is an objective, a very clear objective. In the end, by the end of the lesson, the learner should be able to complete sentences with the correct form of the words given. With the correct form of the words given. You will find in the textbook after the reading comprehension questions, sometimes, mostly, we provided a box which contains words selected from the text that students have read or are going to read. Then there are sentences below the box which asked, now there's a question, complete these sentences using the words in the box. So you as a teacher must confirm that the students have filled the blank spaces using the words, the correct form of the words that are given. Correct form. Correct form here means sometimes a word might be read or write, talk, speak. These words could have been in the box. Very simple words. But in the way they are used now, because vocabulary test, you also language usage. The command of the student, how far has this particular student or these students have reached in learning vocabulary? How far? So those words, read, write, speak, in the sentence might change form. For example, if there is a sentence, Maryam dash a letter to her friend Aisha. She will pick right, definitely, right. But is it the correct form? If she says, Maryam had write a letter to her friend Aisha. You can see that will not make sense. The word form, the correct form should be written. Maryam had written a letter to her friend Aisha. So that's why we are saying sentences with the correct form of the words in the box, correct forms of the words given. The words given. So that's for the vocabulary. Now grammar, then next segment will be grammar. And the objective is demonstrate appropriate use of quantifier. The appropriate use of quantifiers. Appropriate use of quantifiers. In groups, give them this methodology. Ask the student, divide them into groups of 4. In groups of 4, allot students, allot roles, and read the conversation. There is a conversation in the book. Give them roles. You doctor, you patient, for example, role play. Then skimming a text to identify quantifiers such as a lot of, few, a few, little, etc. As we have said, this is another technique of reading, skimming and scanning. Let them skim and scan to identify quantifiers such as a lot of, few, a little, etc. Number 3, ask learners to copy the table in the exercise book. There is a table which you will find in the textbook that's going to require a student to they should copy the table and in the exercise book and make sure they complete. Now you as a teacher you have to check whether they have done it correctly. Then E, we have write on. Finally, as we have always seen in every topic, in every unit, the last segment is write on. So this is let learners write a composition explaining clearly what should be done to minimize indiscipline in the schools. As you can see, this is a composition that is very relevant to our contemporary life. discipline. How can we maintain discipline? How can we maintain clear, explaining clearly what should be done to minimize indiscipline in the school? Because indiscipline is part of life. You see, discipline is a good norm, but indiscipline is also part of our life. You see, some students might be indisciplined in the school, anywhere, in the market, everywhere you go, there's someone who does not adhere to discipline. So give them this topic, a topical imaginative composition at the end of this unit. This composition, one, is very, very familiar. The student identifies himself or herself with very easily. So it is very easy for him or her to write on this topic. Because the student knows that there are students who are indisciplined. Teachers always talk about discipline, be disciplined. At home, we are advised, be disciplined. So how can you maintain discipline? This will also give students to think critically. In the future, we are not only teaching them English language for the purpose of speaking and writing. We are also empowering these students and giving them life skills that's going to help them after school and in the whole of their life. We will go into such compositions, which the way to access is written exercise. This one, there is no oral question. You give the topic, the student writes about it. Write on that topic, should be precise. You should focus on how the student has written precisely on the topic without going out of context of what he or she has been asked, which is a topical question here. Number two, the way the student has logically organized his or her ideas, paragraphing, well paragraphed composition, spelling errors, variety of vocabulary, appropriateness of the vocabulary used, appropriate variety and range of vocabulary and grammar, how communicative skills the student has, showed. It should meet all these criteria of writing, which is a written exercise. So teachers, we have talked about so much about this book, but there's one important thing that I would like to tell you before I conclude. Do not ignore any segment or section of the book, from listening and speaking, reading and comprehension, to the grammar, to the vocabulary, grammar, and then writing. Because as you see, they are very much connected. One skill promotes the development of another skill. Then this other skill helps the student to inculcate or gather another skill relevant for the other skill. For example, the reading skill is improved through the listening skill improves the writing skill. The reading skill improves the vocabulary. The vocabulary improves the writing, and so on. So with that, having said that, I will stop here, and until the next session, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
murtida dhuux aqoontiisa baro lagama maarmi